Welcome to episode 11 of the Randomizer podcast. A couple of notes before we get started. Chaz and I have had to record separately because of the lockdown in place at the moment, and that means the audio quality for this episode is not what we'd hoped for. We'll hopefully get it better for the next time. Since recording this episode, we heard of the sad death of Hamish Wilson, who played Jamie so memorably in a couple of episodes of The Mind Robber, which we discuss a little bit in this episode. So, this episode is dedicated to Hamish's memory. Thanks, Hamish. You were my favourite Jamie.
What is it?
Well, it's called Randomizer, and it's fitted to the guidance systems and operates under a very complex scientific principle called potluck. Now, no one knows where we're going. Not even the Black Guardian.
Not even us.
So, hello and welcome to the Randomizer podcast, episode 11. We are back. Remain indoors. Crazy times. Mitchell and Webb turn out to be prophets. Don't mention the event. I don't know, it feels like years and years since we recorded episode 10 in a very different world where you could do things like sit in the same room as your friends and go outside and so on. But here we are, and coronavirus notwithstanding, the Randomizer podcast will go on. So, I'm Tim.
And I'm Charles.
Now, season 12 ended, but we are going to do a review. And so, Charles and I have secretly and separately compared a list ranking the 10 episodes of season 12 into an order of a top 10. So, without further ado, Charles, I think we should reveal number 10. Shall we just put the sound effect in now? Orphan 55?
No, Fugitive of the Judoon.
Oh my goodness, I really thought you were going to go for
Orphan 55.
I really, you totally had me.
Well, I mean, it was pretty fucking obvious.
If it had been 2 minutes shorter, it would have been quite high up for me, maybe less so for you.
If it had started at the end titles, it would have been at the top.
There's not much to say about it that we haven't already, but I think it comes out bottom for me squarely because of those last 2 minutes. I liked a lot of it up until that point. Let's move on to number 9. So, what was your number 9?
Praxis!
But my number 9 was, and this might be controversial, The Timeless Children.
That's actually good. That is really interesting, considering how much you argued for it.
I know, it's sort of shrunk on me. I don't hate it. It's something had to be number 9, just like something had to be number 10. I was a bit surprised. It just got pushed down the list whenever I looked at other episodes. It was more a case of they got promoted past it than it got demoted down. The thing that I have thought about it since we did the last episode was I was all bigging up how there's this great new mystery of the Doctor before she came through the portal as the Timeless Child. But actually, when she's a child, it just removes all agency, because I'm not sure having the mysterious adventures of a child from wherever this mysterious child came from is actually that ripe in terms of dramatic territory.
Yeah.
And then also that is then played out through her treatment at the hands of her adoptive mother.
It was really pretty nasty. I rescued this child. I love this child. Oh, wait a minute. Great, I'll do what any loving mother does, an experiment.
Yeah, so it makes the Doctor a victim. It makes them very passive, and I think, therefore, the real story, and, you know, I still enjoy this part, the real story is that there is mystery in terms of how the Doctor grew into the Doctor and the division years, for want of a better phrase. Yeah, all of that has sort of diminished for me my initial interest in this new origin mystery, if you like.
I might have actually gone a bit softer on it in some ways. It's not that, I mean, I still think it's a big pile of steaming wank.
So just let us know at what point in the top 10 we go from steaming wank to cold wank to not wank.
I don't particularly rate it that great. I think it's a bit but as an actual viewing experience, in that sense, it's actually quite fun. There's a lot of bits in it I like.
So Praxis for you in number 9 spot. Well, let's talk about Praxis when we get to it in my list. On to number 8. What was number 8 for you?
Oh, number 8. Can you hear me?
That was my number 8 as well. Again, not one that I especially hated. It just got pushed down the list by other ones.
I didn't hate it. It didn't handle things as well as it could. Number 7 was...
Number 7?
Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror.
Ooh, I thought you'd have that much higher. You loved that at the time.
Oh, I did. I do love it, but I realised that a lot of my love is generated because of my love of Tesla. It's okay, but it's not magnificent or anything.
No, my number 7 was Ascension of the Cybermen.
Okay.
Which again slightly surprised me. It just got pushed down the list. I don't know. I must have just liked other ones more. I don't really have any blending insights into why it ended up
I
down
have
there.
a feeling the one that we like will be the same one, the number one. But anyway,
Let's find out. Number 6
is Timeless Children.
Right, I've got Fugitive of the Judoon in there. Certainly the most important episode of the season, without a doubt.
I would say so. It's definitely one of those ones, especially in first viewing, is just rather amazing. Because you've got so much going on. I mean, there's some really good bits, there's some fun bits, but I think the biggest down for me is ironically the Captain Jack bit, and it's not because of Captain Jack, it's because of the reason for Captain Jack being there, purely to take the companions out of the story.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I think one of the lessons of the season, if you like, is that having set up 3 companions, they seem to be fighting it all the way, contriving ways to get them out of the way to make room for other dramatic moments. I think now I reflect on it, perhaps the reason it's down the list is it didn't live up to its promise, so I'm sort of judging it on the season as a whole, maybe, but we didn't get a return of Jack. We didn't get a satisfying future bit of Ruth. We've got kind of wee pep talk in the Matrix, and that's your lot.
They set Skittles up and didn't knock them down. Or Chekhov's gun, wasn't fired.
I go to Chekhov, it couldn't cash. Number 5?
Number 5, Skyfall Part 2.
Ah, okay. Mine was Praxius. I had fun with Praxius. A lot more fun than you did, as we discussed at the time.
I just think it's so dull. We were talking about this at the time, about how I didn't really think it was showing a worldwide thing, because really you only had a certain amount of characters in 3 little locations. If it was Russell T Davies, I don't care if it's overlaying the point, but you would have had news reports from around the world of this happening.
It was enough for me to be told it was worldwide. I didn't need convincing. I didn't need to see a bit of CG of the Eiffel Tower with lots of people turning into plastic.
Again, it was a case of tell, not show.
There are probably thousands, well, hundreds of times in the series history in the past where they haven't had the budget to show, and so they've told. And especially on things like making it, this is going to destroy the world or destroy the universe. There's plenty of that. And there's plenty of that they would just have to take on faith.
Yeah, fair enough. But they've kind of got the budget to do things like that now,
You still have to choose where you put that budget. I do think it is a fair choice to make that, no, we're not going to do our big, people turning into plastic everywhere montage, because that will eat our budget, whereas we would rather have spent here or spent there.
Yeah, I'm still not convinced.
So number 4, Astonish Me.
Skyfall Part 1.
And mine was also Skyfall Part 1.
Yay!
Did I say Skyfall? I think I probably said it because you said it. I'm going to blame you for that one.
Skyfall, shit, Swiss.
The pun's really working there. Yeah, no, great season intro. My number 3 is Spyfall Part 2, and I juggled those 2 around back and forth a lot. The season opener and its follow-up, which was a really good follow-up. I think it was a satisfying follow-up in exactly the way that Timeless Children wasn't a satisfying follow-up to Ascension.
Totally. I mean, I think Part 1 was slightly better than Part 2, although Part 2 felt more clever. It felt very Moffat-y.
Yeah, and we got Ada Lovelace, we got Newer, and, the whole multiple time periods thing. It was a lot packed into this.
Yeah. This is another slight dig at the Timeless Children, but everybody was expecting Lenny Henry to reappear.
So number 3...
Ascension of the Cybermen, I really found quite enjoyable. I thought it was one of the best Cyberman stories we've had in such a long time. It felt high stakes. It looked beautiful.
Yeah, I think Ascension got marked down for me on Unfulfilled Promise again. So, number 2?
My number 2 is Fugitive of the Judoon.
And mine is Nikola Tesla.
Ah, that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed the episode. I think partly spurred on by your own enthusiasm as well.
Great.
Despite the rack knot. It was great fun. By a process of elimination, that means we agree on number 1, shall we say?
Yes, we definitely do.
It was The Haunting of Villa Diodati.
What a brilliant Doctor Who story. Shades of Ghostlight, the introduction of the lone Cyberman was genuinely very creepy.
Toilet humour
In Doctor Who, yeah. Really good guest cast. Byron just being outrageous and arsey as you expect. Mary Shelley, brilliant. The Doctor, fucking great performance from Jodie. Yeah. And ironically, all the companions had things to do. I mean, we were in a sort of, Victorian Gothic mansion, so Ryan had loads to do because they had chairs everywhere.
That is our roundup of season 12, but I think we haven't mentioned our favourite episode yet.
Oh,
which is,
God, yeah.
I don't know, it doesn't really have an official title, does it? I call it Jodie in the Cupboard.
My title for it is The Isolated Woman.
Oh, that's nice, yeah.
In all seriousness, right, it sort of technically is my favourite of the season. And I'm not doing that just to be horrible, but you know what?
Not just.
No, not just. I watched that, and I'm not going to lie to you, right? I felt quite emotional. I cried for quite a long time after it because it felt like the Doctor was there. I suppose these are emotional times because we're all a little bit scared at the moment, and something from my childhood telling me it's going to be okay felt wonderful, and that is the most Doctor-like I think she's ever been. I just absolutely adored it.
It was a lovely little thing, and weirdly enough, we've talked about the show dipping its narrative into real life events, and this is absolutely doing that, but in a not an overblown way, not a way that's in any way trying to make a big thing of itself. It's just an actor who has her costume at home was in a position to make something that would give some people a bit of fun and a bit of comfort.
Found out why she had her costume at home as well. I was talking to Connor about it, and I said, he said she's got a costume at home, and I said, well, to be fair, if I was playing the Doctor, I'd want a costume at home as well, so I could just cosplay in my bedroom.
Cosplay yourself.
Cosplay as myself. But no, apparently the reason they do that is for, if she's got an event to go to, it's just easier.
They had 24 hours to come up with that excuse. And
yeah, we believe it, Jodie.
Nobody was judging. Everybody loved it.
I know, I absolutely adore it.
So yeah, ironically, even though the season has finished, we've been kind of spoiled for new Doctor Who content, from Jodie's little wardrobe soliloquy to rewatches on Twitter. Collectively, people have watched Rose and, was it 11th Hour, the other one?
No, Day of the Doctor.
Day of the Doctor, yes. I haven't managed to join in with any of these yet, which I'm quite frustrated at. And as you mentioned earlier, Vincent and the Doctor is coming up.
It's Monday the 30th of March, so yeah, it will be in the past, bro.
But there are others in the pipeline. It looks like it will continue, and they're doing a great line in getting special guests to join in. I saw a tweet about somebody saying, "So how long until the Dimensions in Time rewatch?"
Oh, Jesus Christ! Things will really have to get desperate.
Would it be that first, or would it be Orphan 55 first? Which one do you want to do?
When we've been self-isolating for 2 years and all the goodwill is gone, we do hate watches.
Some people do those already.
Oh yeah, let's do it. A couple of people have been suggesting doing Classic Who as well, so that might happen, and I'm up for that. I'm up for them all, to be honest. I thought the Day of the Doctor thing was great. Stephen Moffat had arranged for a specially filmed introduction with Strax as a sort of a glove puppet thing.
Yeah, sort of homaging the cinema introduction as well. And around the broadcast of Rose, they had a prequel and a sequel. Yep. So the prequel was a very short bit of fiction, and then an audio recording of the sequel, which had a very amusing ending. So I haven't actually done a spoiler warning in this episode, so maybe skip forward 30 seconds if you don't want to spoil the sequel to Rose. But it has an Autumn surviving and inhabiting the body of an unnamed but blonde-haired parliamentarian.
Yeah, and it was rather amusing that previous to inhabiting that body, he was a clown. Yeah, we have to also thank Emily Cook from Doctor Who magazine she's the one that arranged everything. Massive shout out. I mean, what a fantastic little idea, and it just really took off. It's really lovely as well that it's sort of something just so trivial in a lot of ways. Really has sort of just giving people a little bit of sort of respite from all the horribleness.
I mean, we're turning to our entertainments, and for want of much better to do. It's there is no shame in that. It's a net good.
I'm always very vocal about fans that can be arseholes, toxic fandom, etc. But I will say that obviously there is a healthy element to fandom, and if it's ever been seen, it's definitely been seen in the last week or so, because this has been lovely. Knowing how toxic things can be, people have been generally really good. They've been nice, they've been polite, but also they've all just sort of shared in the love of it. And really and truly, I know we're not in a sort of utopia, and I know we're going to have, disgruntled voices occasionally, and that's absolutely fine. But it has been nice seeing everybody just be a bit kinder to each other for a change.
We must ask the doctor.
So it's time to ask Dr. Schultz. Dr. Schultz, you've been kind enough to share with us your wisdom and depth of your knowledge on many different topics that have been pertinent to Doctor Who in science fiction and, in one alarming case, biology. But I wanted to ask a more meta question than that, and it's simply this. Do you think a scientist working in one specialist field can be expected to give a coherent explanation of any field at all in all of science?
Well, of course, this is completely implausible.
That explains a lot. Thanks, Dr. Schultz, and good luck out there.
A man is the sum of his memories, a Time Lord even more so.
It is time for your Cheatin Memory, which is the part of the show where we randomly select an old Doctor Who episode and then burble about it a bit from memory, go away and rewatch it, and then come back full of fresh insights, or at least half-baked drivel, but half-baked drivel based on a rewatch. And last time, having yearned for some classic Doctor Who, we were delighted, to use the term loosely, to pick the Space Pirates. Now, the reason for our delight was solely that the Space Pirates is 6 episodes long, of which only one actually exists. I had to sort of slightly browbeat Chaz into following me through a rewatch on reconstructions. So episode 2 is the existing episode, and it's really nice that it's there because it lets you get a sense of the story. There are some that just don't exist at all, of course, but the rest of it is a testament to, again, the best side of fandom. Loose cannon, they're called, I think. The background, for those who don't know, is that the BBC wiped a whole load of tapes very regularly right up until the late 70s, and many early Doctor Who episodes were destroyed, and many have been recovered since from overseas copies that were sold, or bits in archives and things that have been hidden in people's cupboards. And so gradually it's been pieced together as best it can, but it's almost certain that we'll never see all of it again. But luckily for us, Doctor Who seems to encourage a certain geeky tendency in people. So at the time of broadcast, a lot of fans would record the audio onto home recording equipment straight out of the television. And so there exists the audio recording of every episode, which in itself is a miracle. But also people had cine cameras and would take little bits off the screen. We've recovered bits of moving footage from sensors that cut bits out. So ironically, those bits survived. Good work, sensors. And also there was a thing called telesnaps, a series of still images of each episode. Basically everything that can be found has been gathered together and lovingly assembled into the best that we can make of an episode. The reconstructions for Space Pirates generally take the form of a still image and the soundtrack playing underneath it, and then scrolling subtitles which explain any action which you can't hear. With that in mind, we watched it. I think it's fair to say our attention was always drifting a little bit because it's quite difficult to watch it that way. But let's put all of that to one side and talk about what we thought of it.
We'll start with the positives, obviously. The quality of the actual telesnaps and the sound quality is really, really quite surprising. All credit to them, because I remember watching the reconstruction of, I think it's episode 5 or 4 of Web of Fear that was released by the BBC, and all they literally done was put the telesnaps on the screen and added the soundtrack. They didn't do a single thing to, give it any sense of momentum.
The touches that they add are things like slowly zooming into some of the photos, or adding a blinking light in a photo, or a radar screen. They might put a very basic effect on top of that.
I mean, it's not sort of rocket science, but what they do is they at least give a sense of momentum to. So, good job on that. Watching episode 2 was enjoyable. Pat Troughton was always great. Watching it in general, it was a bit of a slog. I mean, you can derive entertainment from some of the voices and the look of certain things, and it was very campy and funny in a lot of parts, but I was really struggling to hold my interest in it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with the story. I think it's literally because that's the format that it exists in.
I'm not sure if the story doesn't have something to answer for, because for a thing that's trying to be an epic space opera, And I think arguably there's a little bit of the shadow of Star Trek in it. For something that's trying to be epic and space opera, there's a hell of a lot of people standing around telling each other what has happened. There's a lot of reported action. We were kind of amused by the performance.
Milo Clancy.
Oh no, I was going for the general.
The general's voice was... It sort of reminded me, I'm showing my age here, but there used to be a soap opera in Britain called Crossroads, and there was a character called David Hunter, who ironically appeared in The Dominators. He was one of the Dominators. He had a very sort of deep and pronounced voice.
I've looked him up. He is Jack May. He played General Hermack. And Jack May, the place I knew him from was he plays Gargavar, the waiter, in The Restaurant at the End of the Universe in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy TV series. I kept drifting away from what he was actually saying in the Space Pirates 2. Sir is most evidently alive, otherwise I would not attempt to serve, sir.
If it ever gets animated or whatever, it'll be interesting to see if my opinion changes on it.
The other takeaways I had from it, I liked the model work, the sort of very flat sort of spaceship that we saw a lot of.
I had the feeling, those signs you get for sale signs, they have that sort of corrugated plastic. It does look like the sort of thing, you'd get some sticky back plastic and making a Blue Peter session.
I mean, a very cute little minnow, I think it was called, that came out of the bigger spaceship. The big spaceship looked rather like it had a rooftop swimming pool as well. My other big takeaway from the Space Pirates was that the TARDIS team seemed to take every opportunity possible and enjoy greatly falling on top of each other in a big messy heap. Happens at least 3 times, I'm sure, during the story.
It sort of shows how comfortable they are with each other, how much fun it is together. But yeah, I mean, Pat Troughton seems to really enjoy lying in Jamie's lap. As I say, we've only got 1 episode of the action, and no matter what the story's like, that team, or just generally Pat Troughton and Jamie, I'd say, they are so bloody watchable, even when it's the dullest stories, they are incredibly entertaining. It's always a joy to see a Pat Troughton episode.
We did notice it was a long time before the TARDIS team appear. It was quite a good 10-15 minutes into the first episode.
Of course, we were treated to, the Clampett clan, the hillbilly in space. That is Milo Clancy.
The most enjoyable accent of the lot, I think.
He's wonderful.
At one point, I think I said to you, it's like Foghorn Leghorn.
Yes. I half expected him to go, "You dang tootin' boy."
I say. And one thing I noticed, I was like, oh, it's this sort of laser pistol thing over his shoulder. And I was like, that's a funny way to carry something. And I realized it's like people used to carry their pickaxes.
Of course, yeah. He's a minor 49er.
That was the Space Pirates. Hard to say much about something you can barely see.
Look, when I give the word, press the button. The big one? Yes, maybe it works in conjunction with the others.
I'm not being funny, but see if it's the fucking Dalek Master Plan, I'm going to... As much as I would love to watch it in full, there is a lot of missing episodes.
We'll probably be back to Matt Smith. You know it's going to be. You ready? You can't see it this time. This is fun. I could say anything just to wind you up.
All right, well, let's try and find out. Now, what could it be?
Orphan 50... No. The Zygon Invasion? The Zygon Inversion?
Oh, excellent! Back to Capaldi! That story is one of his real triumphs. There's a wonderful, wonderful speech in the second part about war.
Like what it's good for.
Yeah. And Capaldi just delivers it spot on. It's a good unit story. Good use of the Zygons, really interesting use of them. And also this, which I really like when you get sort of Doctor Who villains and there's a bit of ambiguity, they're not all bad, they're not all good, it's instead of just, the whole race is evil.
We talked a while back about redemption arcs and especially New Who, and this is another example of that. I have very fond memories of it,
Actually really chuffed about that and looking forward to it immensely.
Lovely. We will report back.
I don't have a sonic screwdriver because I'm not off on a romp. I call it what it is.
A great loss of pomp and circumstance.
Let's do Romp or Pomp while we've got the randomizer all warmed up and ready to go. This is where we just randomly click through a few stories and quickly decide if we think it's a rompy, fun knockabout or a poppy, serious, more kind of po-faced, heavy story.
Yeah, just before you start, it's slightly a pity we didn't get the invisible enemy.
Okay, yes, well, I have just rewatched that, so it's like, it feels like training rather than contact should not be made. Here we go. go. The Armageddon factor. Pomp, boring.
Mind you, young men out there
Are dying
for it.
It's definitely got the best unintentional double entendre in the series history. Okay, next. The Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. Romp.
Oh, it's a romp, and it's actually bloody awful.
Not even Bill Bailey could save it. The Ice Warriors. That's Pomp, really. It's quite creepy.
Okay, yeah, Pomp.
Dalek Invasion of Earth.
Yeah,
it's pretty heavy, isn't it? I mean, well, everybody driven underground, listening to broadcasts from their evil overlords. It's the world we're living in. The Celestial Toymaker. It's trying to be a romp, isn't it?
It is a romp.
Let's Kill Hitler. Romp.
Oh, that is such a great romp.
The Rescue.
That's a romp.
Sort of, yeah, it totally is, really.
There's no real threat in that story,
Yeah. Planet of Giants. That's a romp. That's such fun. The Girl Who Waited. Yeah, quite heavy, I think, isn't it?
I think so, but I think it's a rather beautiful story.
Yeah, we'll say Pomp.
Writing a letter to me dad.
Now, we are going to do something new. This is a section we are going to call Connorspondence, because I love ghastly puns. So we've enjoyed very much having Connor, Chaz's son, write in, since he wasn't able to join us. He has written in, we've asked him to surprise us.
And he said, it's okay, I've got a nice hot take that'll piss off loads of people, including you and Tim.
Let's see, I haven't read this yet. I've just seen it. Headline, The 10th Doctor's regeneration is selfish. Ooh. Okay, so I know that the title is baity as fuck, but I mean it LOL. Basically, I always find that something doesn't sit right with the 10th Doctor's regeneration, and here's why. When the 9th Doctor regenerates, it's the first introduction to the process for new viewers. It's briefly explained to Rose and the viewer, and although the Doctor is sad it's happening, he keeps a smile on his face while remembering the good times and assuring everyone that it's going to be okay. The 11th Doctor celebrates when he starts regenerating, using it to show off to the Daleks, and then in the TARDIS, he once again recounts the good times, sees Amy again, but nonetheless keeps smiling and assures Clara it'll be okay. The 12th Doctor is adamant for a while that he doesn't want to change, even after the TARDIS's best efforts to remind him why he should go on. However, once he decides that he will change, the occasion is dressed as something positive. However, the 10th Doctor has none of this. He spends 2 episodes moping around complaining about the incoming generation, throws a tantrum when it's his time, which probably made Wilf feel guilty as fuck, and then goes to visit all his old companions, which, to be fair, I did like, before bursting into tears and crying through his regeneration and actively saying he doesn't want to do it. I think he's dead right so far. This sets a bad precedent for the next Doctor. When Chris Eccleston regenerated, we didn't automatically hate David Tennant because 9 had smiled through his regeneration and told us it was going to be okay. However, 10's regeneration sets the audience up to actively dislike 11 because he's now going to be exactly what 10 had been moping around complaining about for 2 episodes. A new man swanning off. When Matt was cast, he was met with vicious feedback because he was young, because he was unknown, because Doctor Who fans hate change, etc. And having to follow someone who'd been Tom Baker levels of popular as the Doctor was going to be difficult enough, but this, for him, made it even more difficult because it did nothing to offer a hand of encouragement to David Tennant fanboys that this change was going to be just fine. Luckily, Smith was able to smash it out of the park during his time, but a lesser actor may have suffered unfairly because of his writing. So,
he's absolutely right, but I think it's still justified. I think in some ways it sort of proved the Doctor's vulnerability. He did have emotions, and also remember that this particular Doctor, it's done as a joke, but he was a bit vain and narcissistic anyway. But he was starting to sort of embrace life. He loved it, and he loved being himself. Once he got over himself a little with Wilf and everything, I can forgive him for it. And the 10th Doctor, if anything else, had a lust for life.
Cue Iggy Pop. No, I think so. I think Connor's right in many, many ways, but tonally it works. I watched it the first time very much feeling it was self-indulgent, not just on the behalf of Tennant and his Doctor, but also on the behalf of Davies. There was this sort of indulgent whistle-stop tour of all the old pals. That is part of that morning thing that you're talking about. So, and it works. On the rewatch, I had much less of an issue with it. What I would like for the next regeneration is for it to be brutal and for the Doctor to have no control. Because what we've slipped into, mostly with David Tennant, but also with Peter Capaldi, is the Doctor being able to kind of just say, oh, goodness, I'm going to regenerate. Let's run around for a while longer and do all the stuff I wanted to. And that takes away from it a little, in my opinion. So Connor, I think, has a very good point. I think it doesn't spoil things for me, but it is a very self-indulgent and therefore you could say selfish regeneration, that's for sure. I like the shock of Wilf being the reason for it, that knock coming.
Yeah, expecting the master.
Yeah, I like that he shouts at Wilf a bit as well. Like,
Yeah.
He has the anger. But then it is the kind of, it doesn't have to happen now. It's stretching that kind of credulity a little too far. And it makes regeneration less dangerous.
I was crying at David Tennant leaving. I mean, I was absolutely distraught. I love David Tennant. But 2 minutes into Matt Smith, I thought, nope, David, fuck him. Who is he?
David who?
Do you know what I mean? That's the show. And Connor's absolutely right. Doctor Who fans are a total contradiction.
Yes, as you've just ably demonstrated.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they love a show, it's all about change, but they hate change.
Thank you, Connor, for our first Connorspondence, and I look forward to more uses of that ghastly pun as we carry on.
Could it have been affected by tangential deviation coming out of the warp ellipse?
What are you talking about, Grease Stain?
You in pain, Doctor? Yes, it's Tangent of the Week. We are going to talk about Red Dwarf. We're going to regularly talk about Red Dwarf. We're going to rewatch it. We have already watched the whole of season 1 because it was so damn good. We just raced through it. It was something that I've grown up with. It began in February 1988. I was still at school. I had been sick the night of the broadcast and so had taped it and then was the hero of the school the next day because everybody else had watched it live and not taped it and demanded to borrow a copy of my VHS cassette of it. It is essentially in many ways the Odd Couple in space, or maybe with shades of Porridge in space as well. For those who don't know, pause this now. Don't listen to us. Go away and find Red Dwarf and watch it all. It's glorious. It's silly. It's also really clever and really well written. It's got depths beyond its silly sort of facade.
Yeah.
And season 1, going back to season 1, it feels like a very different show from the bulk of its 12 seasons so far. And there is a feature-length episode coming out very soon. Dave Lister, this kind of space bum protagonist, is put into suspended animation only to find that he wakes up 3 million years later, having overslept somewhat, to find the rest of the crew dead after a radiation leak. But he is joined by the hologram of his dead bunkmate, Arnold Rimmer, who is basically a straight-laced failure who has huge aspirations and little talent. And the two of them play off each other very beautifully. And also on board is Cat, who I just adore. Cat is a creature that evolved from Lister's pregnant cat who had been left behind when he was frozen in time.
It's sort of very silly comedy, but there's a hell of a lot in the background and there's a hell of a lot of thought behind it. We go to the second episode, which really sort of shows some very clever writing. That's Future Echoes.
It's probably my favourite episode of season 1. I think it's a close tie-up with Confidence and Paranoia. But Balance of Power is an episode where Lister decides to try and stop Rimmer annoying him by becoming his superior and taking an exam. There's a whole thread running through season 1 very strongly about Lister wanting to have had a relationship with Kachansky, another officer on board who is somewhat inconveniently dead now.
Rimmer has so many neuroses. I have to say, I think Chris Barry's the outstanding cast member in the first couple of seasons.
He's certainly the most experienced at that stage. He'd done voices for Spitting Image and so on.
Craig Charles, I think it was one of his very first jobs.
I tell a lie, actually. It's Norman Lovett. It's definitely the most experienced member of the cast. So we haven't mentioned Holly, the ship's computer. So appearing on monitors as a disembodied head, Norman Lovett plays a beautifully senile computer who's gone a bit peculiar after 3 million years on his own. If you haven't read the books, but you have enjoyed the series, the books really go deep. They're really good, especially the early
very good books.
Episode 5 is Confidence and Paranoia, which is my other big favourite in that season. It sees Lister contract a mutated form of flu and hallucinate, first of all, raining fish, and then his confidence and his paranoia hilariously embodied as a kind of over-the-top game show host and a kind of snivelling, weaseling, critical creep in the corner. It has so many quotable lines. So my young daughter, before she was old enough to watch the programme, I had to sit her down and show her the scene with the cat playing with his food when he throws his chicken away and goes, "Too slow, chicken Maringo," because it was a phrase that I'd picked up and just started saying whenever something was too slow. The cat is most catty in these early seasons.
It's rather funny what you say about the quoting, because there are so many quotes that I have used in my life from Red Dwarf. Now, I wouldn't say I'm as big a fan as you. I haven't watched it for ages. But when we were watching it, you would have noticed that I immediately, the lines, I could quote everything that was coming up because it was so ingrained in my mind. I mean, there is a particular line where Rimmer says when he's saying goodbye to the crew, he says, "I've come to regard you all as people I met," which I have used so many times when I've left jobs or had to give a speech.
It's the pause, though. He delivers it brilliantly. So I've come to regard you as people I've met.
I
think we must have seen it at an impressionable age back in the late 80s. And it was a big hit and, has run the sort of slightly choppy history in recent years. It's run to 12 seasons in this new special that's coming. The last 3, I think, seasons have all been on the Dave channel, as is this special. Season 1 rounds out with Me Squared, so Rimmer has tricked Lister into duplicating his hologram. And we talked last episode about how science fiction shows have to have an episode with duplicates, and Red Dwarf gets it out of the way straight off the bat.
Yeah, very, very much. This show is porridge in space, especially the first couple of series. It's a sort of 2 guys arguing, in a room, and that was the essence of porridge a lot of the time. That requires some of the best writing. It's very much up there with Dick Francis and Ian Lafreniere writing style, or Galton and Simpson. And again, it's a writing partnership because you have Rob Grant and Doug Naylor. As fun as those early episodes are, I don't think you could have kept it going like that.
And we'll talk about those as we come to them. We're going to rewatch the whole damn thing. So more Red Dwarf chat to come on this Doctor Who podcast.
I accept your challenge. Oh, you do you?
It's the challenge time, and I've asked Chaz to watch The Mutants, so let's hear why he didn't this week.
I was going to go down to the local DVD shop to buy it, and I bravely went out, and a tank rolled up, and an army officer told me to get back into my house, and I said I was going shopping, and he said, "Is it for essentials?" And I said, "Yes, I'm going to buy The Mutants DVD, Doctor Who." He said, "Well, I think it may be essential. The government disagrees with that, so you have to go back to your house." And I said, "But I have to, because I've made a promise, and I always keep my promises." And he said, "You either go back to your house," or he said, I'm authorised to force you. And, I am willing to sacrifice myself for the podcast.
Well,
but
clearly not. I think you should have insisted.
Well, I did insist, but he sort of
just flimsy. It's not like there's any kind of crisis on or anything.
Well, sort of
next week.
Yeah, sure.
All these corridors look the same to me.
This is Which Corridor Is This?, which is where we talk about my rewatch of Doctor Who. I've been inspired by Toby Haydock and Rob Sherman's books Running Through Corridors, where they watch the show from the beginning in order, episode by episode. And I have reached The Invisible Enemy, which is Tom Baker, Louise Jameson as Leela, and the wonderful introduction of K9. Invisible Enemy is, I think it's the first sort of off story for a while. Certainly the space prawn that we were alluding to as a less than convincing monster, not least because it has to be wheeled along the corridors. But there's a lot to like in this. Michael Sheard, and yet another Doctor Who appearance, spending most of it sporting flaky eyewear.
Contact has been made.
So the Doctor gets infected, Leela doesn't, and that's one of the drivers of the plot. And this is where the sort of diminishment of Leela's character that I've been afraid of, I think, begins to kick in. Louise Jameson is still marvellous, but the script is now making great play, having set her up as immune somehow. There's a lot of stuff about, it's because she's not very clever, which is so utterly unfair, because the character has previously been razor sharp, unquestionably intelligent.
I suppose it could be said it's like, like the Wirren sort of absorb knowledge and so on, and maybe like the virus is wanting academia knowledge, like technical knowledge, whereas Leela's cleverness is in her sort of instincts, and she's not stupid. If she'd had the same education as anybody else, she would have been bright, genius, whatever.
But I think it does treat her unfairly. There are a few kind of cheap jokes. There was lots to like. I liked that they had this kind of funky font and these futuristic spellings dotted around the set design, and the model work is rightly lauded, is very wonderful. It looks very dated to modernise, but it's beautifully, lovingly created and shot spacecrafts and space stations. I did think the Baal Foundation was a little kind of clunky looking.
I do have quite a lot of love for this story, because I really love K9 anyway. I mean, he's one of those things that divided fans a lot. I think he's sort of more loved now than he ever was. I think the crew weren't as keen because he just took forever to set up shots with them. I can see from a technical point of view you wouldn't want them around. The space prawn, yeah, I mean, it looks ridiculous, but it's going back to what I said about Praxis. The space prawn at least gives you something to face off, to talk to.
You know, it's a decently built thing. It's just in a brightly lit room with an unforgiving lighting. It's telling that when it first appears inside the Doctor's mind, which is the other nice part of the whole fantastic voyage going inside the Doctor's mind and thing. But when it first appears, it's sort of in a bin bag with just a claw sticking out. The sort of low point is the Doctor's strapped back on the table and the prawn is next to him, and he's kind of batting away the fronds that come out of it. And in running through corridors, I think it's Toby says, this is Tom Baker showing dignity even in this moment, and I think it's just the actor keeping that damn stuff out of his face. That's what I read. But yeah, they also talk about the kind of slight clumsiness of the direction here, because there's a very visible lip at the base of the TARDIS door, and so the shot when K9 enters the TARDIS has to conspicuously avoid that. And, actually, the worst culprit is there's a key moment which I think must have just been fouled up technically somehow, but they cut to the model of the eggs of the swarm just as Michael Sheard sneaks up and shoots the antidote out of the Doctor's hands. You don't actually see that happen. It's inferred, which is odd. So I can only imagine this was a kind of desperate cutting around some sort of mistake. There were two other things I noticed. There's a use of the Gallifrey in Ireland joke, but also the implication before that scene is that Leela has piloted the TARDIS, which, I mean, so much for not being intelligent. Come on. I think the Doctor instructs her, but she is the one who presses the buttons to get it to Baal.
That is Leela's instincts again, you know. I mean, yeah, okay, she doesn't understand the technicalities of it, but her instincts are very, very good. When she's written well, they really play on that, you know.
An imperfect story, but lots of fun. And K9 is now on the TARDIS. So next we go to Image of the Fendal, which I will talk about once I've watched.
Predictable as ever,
This is Doctor by Doctor, where we randomly select a Doctor and then talk about their era. And the Boxo Docs is getting quite empty now. We've only got a few left. So, well, you've got the box and we're isolating, so you have to pick it. It's so unfair.
And it is Doctor number 2.
Hey, lovely. Just after we did Space Pirates, there we go.
Pat Troughton.
So he's the Doctor who has most of the missing episodes, so his era is very underrepresented, but everybody's so fond of him. I scarcely heard a bad word about his Doctor from any quarters. That's saying something.
I mean, it's sort of becoming better represented because we've got a hell of a lot of animation of his era, so, you know, that is helping. I think out of all the Doctors, he seems to be the one that everybody falls back to. He was the one that came up with that whole thing of act like a fool to confuse the enemy. It's a sort of Shakespearean, you know, the jester thing.
The fool in Shakespeare is the one who speaks the wisdom and truth to power because they're the fool. They can get away with it.
I mean, he's a real sort of chameleon of an actor, you know. He can really immerse himself in a part, and he is a very, very interesting face. It's very expressive. He's wonderful. And you've got some of the best companions come out of this era as well. You've got Jamie and Victoria and Zoe, especially Jamie. I mean, him and Pat Troughton have such a fantastic camaraderie.
Let's get quick thoughts about his episodes, then we'll just rattle through. So Power of the Daleks is the first regeneration story, of course, and there's a lot of suspicion from Ben and Polly about who this man is. And obviously the Doctor's character is unformed, but it's a cracking Dalek story as well. There's really is. Scheming away in the background.
Pat Troughton was given probably the most difficult job, you know, because he was sort of taking over for Arnold.
In comes Jamie in the Highlanders, and he then remains for the rest of Patrick Troughton's time. The Underwater Menace is probably best forgotten. It's not that bad, actually. I've watched the recon. It has the immortally scenery-chewing Professor Zarkov shouting, "Nothing in the world can stop me now."
I mean, I don't mind a bit of camp. I don't mind a bit of sort of, you know, silliness and romp.
There's some interesting surviving footage of the Fish People, one of the show's several visits to Atlantis as well. The Moon Base has Cybermen.
Now, that is a really good story. I like the animation in general in most stories, but I find it takes you out of it, especially if you're watching the footage, then animation. But in this one, for some reason, it didn't even register. I was sort of just watching it and so into it, you know?
Macro Terror, the Macro returned in Gridlock, of course. It's quite a good story, actually. It's quite sinister population control kind of thing.
It had a sort of season 24 vibe to me, it's sort of very silly and dangerous, a bit Paradise Tower.
Faceless Ones, which has just come out with an animated reconstruction, and Ben and Polly leave. It's the most successful Doctor Who set in an airport, probably. But I find it genuinely creepy. Even I haven't seen the animation yet. The kind of idea of taking people up in a plane and it disappears magically was really, really quite creepy, I think. And Evil of the Daleks is considered quite the classic, I think.
Yeah, unfortunately, just one episode as well, which is a damn shame.
Well, that's ripe for an animation, surely, that one, isn't it?
Absolutely, that one is definitely going to be animated at some point.
Tomb of the Cybermen, which was a missing classic until it wasn't missing anymore, and became slightly less classic, but I love Tomb. It's so iconic.
I do. I really, really like Tomb. I think I probably like Moonbase slightly better, but I definitely think it's up there as one of the greats. And the music, I mean, I know it gets reused a lot, but I do love that music.
Oh, and it is the sound of the randomizer for us as well.
Is it? I don't listen to these podcasts, so I wouldn't know.
What is it? You don't like the presenters or something?
I think it's shit.
I've heard all the opinions before. The Abominable Snowman introduces the Yeti, and I guess my kind of knowledge after the fact of Patrick Troughton's era was informed by the Five Doctors, which makes a big play of a Yeti, so it was very interesting to go back and watch the recon of this story. Ice Warriors, bringing in the Martians of the same name.
Great design, good enemy.
Enemy of the World, which was also recovered and proved to be much better than anybody expected.
Isn't it? Yeah. I mean, we were just talking about it.
Pat Troughton doubling up, and the sort of James Bondy world-ranging plot. Is that the first time Doctor Who's had such a kind of international feel to it while still being earthbound?
The way that they make the world, it seemed like a worldwide thing. It's something that maybe later series could have drawn.
Like Praxeus.
Yeah.
That's where you were going. I saw that one coming. Web of Fear is the return of the Great Intelligence and the Yeti, of course, and this time brilliantly set in the London Underground. And of course, it's the cliched fact, of course, but they recreated Covent Garden Underground so faithfully that the London Underground people thought they'd snuck into film without permission, having been turned down.
Wonderful. And of course the introduction of Colonel Lethbridge Stewart.
Yes, the Brigadier before he was the Brigadier. Fury from the Deep.
Nice little iconic thing with the companions screaming actually saves the day.
It's almost a new series style level of irony.
And the one where she leaves as well. I don't know a terrible amount about it because it's one of the missing ones, but it is going to be the next animated one.
That's exciting. It's well worth the recon. I hope it comes up for us because it's very listenable, watchable.
I hope it comes up for us when it's an anime.
The randomizer will decide. Wheel in Space introduced us to Zoe, who I'm so fond of.
Oh, she's lovely. I love Zoe.
She's a kind of logician and is played as very kind of bluntly logical. I'm not quite a Mr. Spock way.
There's just something so lovable about her, but so clever. And I sort of love the sparring between her and Jamie.
They're a nice mix now. You've got the far future smart arse and the kind of rugged, loyal, instinctive Highlander.
Yeah.
It's a good mixture. And of course it prompts one of Pat Troughton's best lines, which is, "Logic, my dear Zoe, merely enables one to be wrong with authority."
Great, absolutely brilliant lines.
So the Dominators is a less successful one, but it's still an interesting story about the control of population, a nasty race who are subjugating a nice race.
Sort of Pat Troughton by numbers in a lot of ways.
It's got the Quarks, they're fun.
Yeah, Quarks are fun.
The Mind Dropper, however, is one of the most wonderful stories, especially episode 1.
Yeah, I mean, The Mind Robber is possibly one of the most amazing Doctor Who stories because everything was done, literally done because they never had any money or they had a problem, so they had to come up with a solution. Episode 1, they had practically no money, so they came up with the white background. They reused robots from another TV show, Out of the Unknown, I believe, and spray painted them white. And they had all these just amazing ideas. In later episodes, Fraser Hines is ill, and his cousin, Hamish Wilson...
It's not his cousin. Hamish is no relation. Hamish was a colleague of mine many years ago, so I actually managed to interview him at the time about his time in Doctor Who. He loved it, and he told me that when he sat down to do the DVD commentary and Fraser Hines came in, he thanked Fraser Hines for playing his part so well.
Brilliant. But I mean, it's such a great way of doing it because of that particular story. They have to make his face up.
Improvising in a crisis at its finest.
I mean, it really is possibly the best existing Troughton story.
The Invasion, a strong Cyberman story. story back on Earth.
Really good. With the Brigadier.
And again, it's been reanimated, some of that, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think there was 2 episodes missing, so that was the very, very first animation they ever done, and it is one of the strongest ones.
The Crotons has this race of crystalline beings.
With South African accents.
Well, there's political satire to be had, I guess. But...
It's very funny. It's not up to much as a story, but it's incredibly funny and incredibly enjoyable, and it has got one of the best Troughton routines with Zoe. So, come here, how's this work? No, go away, I know how. Now, come back.
Seeds of Death is the Return of the Ice Warriors. I love this one. It was one of the earliest ones that was on video, and so I saw it a lot. Very atmospheric, very creepy.
I got a voucher, and I remember a few days before New Year, I went to Woolworths. Oh, remember that? And they had a few Doctor Who videos for sale, and it was either going to be Seeds of Death, Spearhead from Space, or Death to the Daleks. And I remember the reason I chose Seeds of Death was because it was the longest one.
Yeah. Value for money.
I wanted more value for money, and my God, I'm so pleased. Because it was the first proper Pat Troughton I'd seen, because I think I'd only really seen Crotons and the Five Faces. So this was amazing to see a Pat Troughton big, long story with a really big, impressive enemy. And do you know what? I watched that nearly every Sunday afternoon for months, because it was such a nice, long story.
When the Peter Cushing movies weren't on, that was the alternative.
Yeah. And it was, honestly, I have such a love for that, and I still watch the VHS.
Sweet. Well, when it comes up in the randomizer, I think we'll have to get the VHS out.
Yeah.
So the Space Pirates, I really can't think of anything to say about the Space Pirates. We'll just move on. The War Games ends the Patrick Troughton era with a 10-part epic and introduces the Time Lords, so huge amounts of fan lore. It's quite a slog to get through all 10 episodes, I find.
I don't necessarily find it a slog. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know you could easily lose probably 5 episodes from it and it would still make perfect sense. I know it's a runaround, but I think because you know it's the last one, they're great in it. I sort of forgive it, and I don't mind them getting caught. There's even one point where Zoe goes, "Oh, here we go again." As a story, it is a bit of a drag, but as a Pat Troughton, it's just, this is the last hurrah. So
yeah,
why not?
Well, I mean, honourable mentions to 3 Doctors and 5 Doctors and 2 Doctors.
I mean, he's the one that comes back.
So the Pat Troughton era, very sparse, but you know what we have, we treasure. And if there's a dream of more, I think Power of the Daleks would be top of many people's list. Evil as well, yeah. Just anything of the Daleks.
It's the end.
Remain indoors.
But the moment has been prepared for.
9 times out of 10.
Thank you for listening. If you have any questions or feedback, or if you're trapped in a Judoon prison, we can be reached at randomizerpodcast@gmail.com.
And you can reach us on Twitter at randomizerpod, and in both cases that is randomizer with an S, not a Z.